This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.
We're off. Can I welcome members and officers here at City Hall and the public in the gallery or watching on the webcast to today's meeting of the GLA Oversight Committee? Can I remind participants to turn your phones off or put them on silent? And then can I also ask members to ensure electronic devices aren't in front of your microphones? Can I ask the clerk, Nicoletta Kemp, to confirm any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. We've had no apologies for absence.
Hooray. On declarations of interest, can we note the list of offices held by Assembly members?
Noted.
Thanks. And can I also ask members if they have any disclosable pecuniary interests in specific items listed on the agenda? Right. Brilliant. Minutes, can we confirm the minutes of the meeting on the 4th of September 2024 to be signed by me as a correct record?
Agreed.
Fantastic. On membership of the committee, can we note that Assembly Member Duval has stood down from the committee and Assembly Member Mahfouz has been appointed to the committee by the London Assembly for the remainder of the 2024 to 25 Assembly year?
Noted.
Thanks. And can I welcome you, Vassam, and look forward to working with you as Deputy Chair. And can I also thank Len for the work he's done for the Oversight Committee over the years, and it's been great to work with him on those projects the last couple of years. Summary list of actions. Assembly Member Russell.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Apologies.
Yep.
The fourth item on the summary list of actions, consider the options available to obtain the minutes of the Green Bond Programme Steering Committee and on a confidential basis if necessary. Now, it says it's completed. We've got at Appendix 3, there is a letter to you, Emma, from Chair, from Enver, who is the Interim Chief Finance Officer. It seems we're not going to see the minutes and not on a confidential basis either. But I just wondered if there's any expectation that the green bond is going to exist, because the information that's come through that's linked in the letter doesn't seem to be talking about that green bond programme going forwards, and I just wondered, is it still a thing, or is it not?
David, if you wouldn't mind.
Thank you, Chair. As I'm here, it's still absolutely a thing in principle. It remains the case that it is dependent on market conditions. Of course, the committee will be aware that we reached an agreement with the UK Investment Bank, which is helping to fund the Green Finance Fund. I think I heard at one point a suggestion that conditions were getting more favourable, but that isn't the same as them having reached the point at which it would be needed. And obviously, markets ebb and flow, and so officers are still looking at it. But whether a green bond is the ultimate solution when we need to borrow externally is still to be determined.
Thank you.
Thanks. And David, I should have taken that opportunity to say David Bellamy, Chief of Staff for the Mayor, for the many viewers of Oversight Committee that might not be aware of that. I don't know off the back of that, do Assembly members want us to write further to ask again for those minutes and for clarification as to why we can't have them, or are we happy to let it lie?
I think that's, yeah.
Perfect. Okay, the proposed delegation of authority to the Chairman of GLA Oversight. Can we agree that a delegation of authority be given to me as Chair of the GLA Oversight Committee in consultation with the Deputy Chair and party group leads to respond to the consultation regarding the arrangements for December 2024's People's Question Time meeting? Thank you. Response to committee output. Can we note the response from the Chief Officer to the committee's letter on job families?
Noted.
Brilliant, thank you. And we move on to our first principal item of today's business, mayoral decisions. Can I welcome Mary Hartley, Chief Officer, and formally welcome David Bellamy, the Mayor's Chief of Staff. And just, I suppose maybe I'll come to you first, David. I don't know if you want to take an opportunity to perhaps explain your role when it comes to mayoral decisions, and also update us on why the mayoral decision-making framework required updating earlier this year.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. I think I'll try and take those questions in turn. In terms of my role, I would have two potential roles. The key thing really to understand this is the back page of the mayoral decision, which basically, if you like, sets out the process flow. Every mayoral decision has a mayoral advisor, who is the person who leads on that particular policy area for the mayor, and before a mayoral decision advances through the process, they've got to sign off and say that they're happy with what it proposes. And so, as essentially the mayor's advisor for resources, I would do that for a number of mayoral decisions and also a number of the governance-related decisions as well. And then the final point is that as Chief of Staff, I'm required to sign off all mayoral decisions to say that I'm satisfied that this is an appropriate request to be submitted to the mayor. And part of the process by which I do that, as well as my own reading of the decision itself, is through the Mayoral Delivery Board, in previous terms the Corporate Investment Board, which I chair, and that meets every week, and that notes all the decisions that are proposed to go to the mayor, and also that gives the opportunity for anybody present to, as well as understanding what's been asked of the mayor, to also be able to say if they've got any concerns or there's a risk that any aspects of what's going to the mayor has been missed. And so that is part of the process I use to fulfil that, along, of course, with the signature of the Chief Finance Officer in terms of the financial and legal implications having been considered properly. So that, if you like, is my part in the process. Obviously happy to answer more questions. In fact, should I pause there before I go on to the second part of your question? Or this could become a monologue.
We're here for the monologue, David. Go for it. It's good. Keep going.
Careful what you wish for. As the committee noted, we put forward to the Mayor Mayor Decision 3274, which he signed in June, I believe, which is brought updates to our governance around decision making. So the GLA has a document called Mayoral Decision Making at the GLA, and what that does is it sets out how the powers that fall to the mayor, with certain exceptions, for instance, his planning powers, which are different and handled through different governance arrangements, but his decision making, what the process is for that, and arrangements where appropriate that the mayor delegates those. Now, in essence, those arrangements are the same that we inherited in 2016, but we have been looking and doing some work, which probably began in anger some point last calendar year, at actually saying, right, how can we approach that, and how can we ensure that we have as strategic a possible approach to our decision making at the GLA, and how can we ensure that we are absolutely in all regards taking a best practice approach to how we go about doing our delivery. And the answer to that is essentially a portfolio management process. If you look at the GLA's resources, some things are spent on the cost of running the building, the fact that you need a finance department, a finance system, a HR department, all the the essential back office things, some of the statutory duties that we have to perform, like people's question time. So you have all that, and we tend to refer to that as the kind of core of the GLA Mayor budget. And then the balance of funding is available for essentially spending on the Mayor's priorities to try and deliver for Londoners against the GLA's powers around economic development, social development, environmental improvement, and so forth. And so really what we're trying to do is establish a portfolio approach, and within that the Mayor will establish programmes of work that will be cross-cutting activities where appropriate to deliver change for Londoners, and then those programmes run in accordance with programme management best practice, will commission and oversee projects. And so really the key thing we were trying to do in this update to mayoral decision making was enable the adoption of that process and ensure that our decision making, which runs on the same principle of the Mayor taking decisions based on the advice of the Mayoral Decision Board, or delegated decisions being taken by senior officers within the framework approved by the Mayor, that process aligned in with our portfolio management and the work of the Mayoral Delivery Board. And so that was the essence of what we're trying to achieve with that change.
Thanks. And as part of this update, what is the target deadline for publishing mayoral decisions after they've been signed?
So the policy remains as it always has, which is that mayoral decisions, when they are signed, they go back to the mayoral decisions team, which is actually part of the Secretariat, and they then administer that, which includes publication, unless there's a reason why, as set out in the decision and approved, that publication needs to be delayed. So, my expectation is that usually they would go up the day after signature. And then, of course, it's also worth saying the Mayor, in his report to the Assembly ahead of each Mayor's question time, lists out all the mayoral decisions that have been approved since his previous report. So there's absolute, there's double transparency there in terms of what has gone on in the last time period.
And how many decisions haven't gone up after that day period this year so far?
So there's two parts to that question, I guess. One is a decision being delayed because there's some reason why it can't immediately be published, such as it needs to be published alongside an announcement, or we need to wait for a partner to make an approval, or there's got to be a contractual process. It's not unusual that there will be a delay of a few days on. I have no statistics at all, so this is a best guess. I'm going to say about one in four might have that, would be about where I think it is. But mostly those would be out in a matter of a couple of weeks, because it's just synchronising the decision and the announcement that obviously follows on from the decision. The other is a question about administratively, are things being put up as quickly as they should be? I have great confidence in the Secretariat and the officers within it. I'm not aware of any examples where there have been delays, but neither do I spend my time refreshing the decisions pages on the website to see if they have gone up. So I couldn't give you a categoric answer on that.
Yeah, you're missing a fun activity there, David. Because it does seem strange, some of the mayoral decisions that have been delayed for years on publications, for example, some going back to 2020, then published in 2024. And especially, I think, to those that are working in that sector who want to see that mayoral decision published, it's been quite confusing as to why they've had to wait so long. How best to tackle that concern where things aren't published? Perhaps you've got a reason for holding them on, onto them, but people, as far as they're aware, just think it's not transparent.
So I think there's possibly it's a helpful phrase, two aspects to that. The first is, right, is the part one of the decision, the main part of the decision, being delayed? As I say, delay for announcement, delay for contractual agreement is normal. Material delays, like 4 years, like you're suggesting, I'm not saying it could never happen, but I would say that that's very rare. What we try to do is we try to ensure we have a part one decision, and if there is something that needs to remain confidential, that would be in the part two of the decision, which then would have a delayed publication date on it for those reasons. And so by trying that approach, we try and get the actual fact of the decision and all that can be publicly shared to be shared quickly. And then the part two has a review date on it. And it is worth saying, I think, two things there. Firstly, that I can and I do challenge any part one publication dates to make sure that there is good justification for them. Secondly, that a part two not being published immediately and the date that's set for deferral is set on legal advice. So it is a qualified member of the legal team who looks at the balance of the value from transparency versus the commercial or other legal risk to publication, and they make the recommendation on what should be done in that instance. And so that's the approach, and it's about trying to get the part one published as soon as we can, and ensuring that the part two is just about those parts that, whether it's commercial reasons or whatever, do need to stay confidential.
I would suggest perhaps there is room to make this more transparent around those reasons, but I don't want to get into reading out lists of mayoral decisions right now because of time. I'm just going to bid to both of you to be slightly concise as we move forward with members, and I'll call on Assembly Member Mahfouz.
Thank you, Chair. So my questions will be specifically about the thresholds being changed. So wanted to ask, first of all, how did the Mayor arrive at the new financial thresholds for mayoral decisions, which, of course, has been increased from 150,000 to 250,000?
Yeah. So as part of this update, we recognised, obviously, we've been through a period of high inflation, as the committee will know, and the £150,000 limit had stayed the same for a very long period of time, and so it was necessary to update both that limit and the limit that applies to decisions that are delegated to assistant directors, which was previously £50,000, and those were officer recommendations on where it was appropriate to go. Given the amount of time that had elapsed since the previous limits were set, which I couldn't tell you precisely when they were, because it's certainly before Sadiq became mayor.
2014, most of them hadn't been reviewed since 2014.
And the other aspect of it, though, that is also worth remembering about this is that it's not, yes, the financial limit comes into play, but also the mayoral decision-making document reserves for the Mayor any decision that can be regarded as novel, contentious or repercussive, regardless of the amount of money involved.
Thanks, David and Mary, for that. So you've talked about some officer recommendations, which has led to the increase, and what I wanted to answer, so just checking with the officers what advice they received in terms of changing that threshold. And secondly, how does that new threshold compare with good practice for executive level oversight elsewhere?
So, I mean, the point about, I mean, it was the officer advice ultimately from our governance and financial teams that came up. I don't know.
Well, our GLA economists, in consultation with the Chief Finance Officer, came up with the revised levels. That I can be sure of.
Yeah. And in terms of the point about oversight, well, yeah, mayoral decision making sets out that delegated decisions where they are more of a things that are very technical or administrative nature, fine, but anything that is of kind of substance, they need to gain the approval of the relevant mayoral advisor before they proceed. And also, a list of all proposed delegated decisions is seen each week by a mayoral delivery board, so that there's no question that an officer is just going off and taking a decision without colleagues generally being aware. So that means that not only are the senior mayoral team aware at a high level of what is the decision is about, but equally the chief officer, the chief finance officer, and executive directors are all aware as well, so that there is that internal transparency there.
Thank you. I mean, a quick check on the Bank of England inflation calculator would tell you that £150,000 worth of spend in 2014 would be equivalent of about 201,000. So there's still a bit of a gap there between purely inflationary pressure and what we're looking at £250,000 as the new threshold. But my next question was really about, you talk about what would fall in between. So how many roughly of those MDs perhaps over the last year or last few years would have fallen between the old threshold and the new threshold? And what type of decisions would they have been?
I think the answer to that is very, very few. So we are not expecting this increase in thresholds to materially impact the number of mayoral decisions.
And it's also, it will, obviously it will have some impact, but coming back to my previous point, it's not just an exercise of going back through all the previous decisions and saying, well, right, what was the total value on them? It's also, applying the novel contentious repercussive test, which means that, it can be a decision to spend £1, but if it's novel, it's contentious, or it's repercussive, then it's a decision for the mayor to take.
And David, you touched upon additional decisions being made at the director level and also potentially at the AD level as well, the assistant director. So I know you've touched upon it, but just in terms of making sure that that oversight and scrutiny of those decisions, going back to the really important point you made right at the start as to the rationale for all of these changes that we're talking about today, is about delivery, is about focus on the priorities. So how do we make sure that the decisions that aren't mayoral decisions still are focused on delivery and those outcomes? So,
I mean, the way the process has worked is that because we have that internal transparency before the decision is taken, we know that the relevant mayoral advisor is aware of it because it's there in the paper. So if an assistant director for some reason failed to talk to a mayoral advisor about it, well, the mayoral advisor will see it in the mayoral delivery board papers. So that is the first thing. But secondly, the fact that then all the corporate management team, all the mayoral advisor team are sat around the table ensures that there is that visibility on it. And anybody can, and is on occasion does, challenge why a particular decision is being proposed and what the alignment with the mayor's priorities is. Then,
so sorry, just to clarify, David. So at that point, when it comes to the board, the decision is in proposal stage rather than having been
correct.
made. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, definitely. That's the point I was going to make. They're not signed by the director until they have been cleared through the mayoral delivery board. The other point I would make is that the DDs and the ADDs often flow from mayoral decisions because then they are executing some delegated authority and some other particular parts of the piece as well. So they're not a complete disconnect between these three levels.
Yeah. And that, what we would hope to achieve with the new governance approach as we roll it out is we'll make the linkages between the overall, what we're trying to achieve in a programme of work, and then the specific activities underneath it will become even clearer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblymember Cooper.
So in practice, we've had the change of name from the Corporate Investment Board to the Mayoral Development Board, the MDB that you're referring to. In practice, is there any change in the way that the review is carried out? Is it just a change of name?
So the Mayoral Delivery Board, I mean, there are probably a couple of things that are different. One is that we have some functional body representation. CIB did have the MOPAC Chief Executive in attendance, and we've retained that, but we now have senior officer representation from TfL and the Fire Brigade as well. And the second part, and one of the kind of driving reasons for the change, is that the delivery board is there to own this portfolio, whereas before it was very much focused on, right, well, what are the decisions coming up from the teams and the areas working on delivering particular areas. We're now trying to take this more coordinated portfolio approach, and so the delivery board is there to own that and work on that on behalf of the mayor, and we concluded that we should change the name to reflect that change of approach, just so that everybody knew this was a new thing and a difference.
Okay, so that is what you would say is the main difference between the old way of operating and the new way of operating.
So in terms of, that's the reasons for the name. We will see many more differences in the ways of operating as we establish the programme structures, and then both the programme boards that govern those programmes, and then how they interact with the MDB, which, given the range of work that we undertake and the size in membership of the Mayoral Delivery Board, we are going to be using a number of committees of the MDB, which are basically essentially subgroups, not to take any decisions in any way on behalf of MDB, but to be able to provide that detailed work that you couldn't do in an MDB meeting because there are simply too many people around the table.
So when you just mentioned some additional people who would be coming onto the MDB, you said some functional body representation would be improved. Who else is coming on then, and what's its membership in terms of numbers? So
the membership is mayoral advisors, which is, if you include the statutory deputy mayor, as one always would, and also the deputy mayor for policing and crime, that is about 14. We have a couple of other members of the mayor's office, the mayoral head of policy and the mayoral head of delivery, for the obvious reasons. And then we would have the corporate management team, with the exception of the executive director for the assembly, and so that would be six or seven people. So you are hitting there, 22, 23 people, then functional body representation, which would take you up to about 26, I would guess, and I apologise to anybody who's a member of the MDB and I've temporarily forgotten about. But
yeah, so that really is quite large. So how are you going to ensure that there's transparency and accountability of the MDB? Is that why you've got the structure of committees?
So the point about Mayoral Delivery Board, as with Corporate Investment Board before it, is that it's there as a support to the decision-making process. The decisions need to stand on its own terms. The GLA model is that we have an individual decision-maker, obviously most notably the mayor, but failing that, matters can be delegated. And this comes back to the point about transparency of the decisions, is that the right thing to be doing is to be exercising scrutiny on those decisions, and the work of the MDB and any committees we establish underneath it is there to support the production of those decisions in order that the right decisions are taken for London, and then the mayor ultimately can be held to account on those.
So you've got the main body, and then you've got all of these committees, which rumour has it are all going to be chaired by Richard Watts, is that correct? And the committees are going to be scrutinising the mayoral directives as well as the main body. I just want to get clear on that.
So I think firstly it's saying mayoral decisions fall into probably a couple of categories. There are mayoral decisions, for example, where the mayor acts with the assembly. So an example would be when we appoint a statutory officer. Yeah. And there will be other decisions of that broad nature that MDB will see, but they're not part of our delivery portfolio for London. They are internal governance. Yeah. And so they would just flow through, as has always happened. In terms of the committees, first to say they are a new thing. They've all met once. I think one of them may have just have met a second time now. They are about, because we are talking very approximately 18 to 20 programmes that the GLA group is trying to deliver as part of our portfolio. And as discussed, and the maths about the number of members of the mayoral delivery board, that's too many programmes and too many people to go and do the in-depth work on all of it, because it just would be too expensive. So the idea is to get subset of mayoral delivery board, the people with the specialists in the particular areas, to be doing that detailed work. And then that will flow through mayoral delivery board so that there's transparency to all members and colleagues can raise things if they wish. But also we've got the forum for the detailed support and challenge to the individual programmes.
So would we, as the scrutiny body for all of this new structure and the mayoralty, have access to the same kind of reports that are going to these committees and to the main MDB? Obviously, some might need to be on a confidential basis, but we have access to that? So
what you have access to is exactly as before, firstly, in terms of publication of decisions, publication of minutes of the MDB, just as we always have with CIB. And so that is always there. What we are looking at, and this is where
so that's the published decisions, but not the papers that have informed the decisions, which is what I was asking about.
If you look at the mayoral delivery board pack, it is very largely the decision for set of decision forms, because the goal is not to create more bureaucracy and have another set of papers. The goal of the mayoral delivery board is, are we happy with the decision? And as mayoral decision making sets out, the decision form needs to be a complete document that establishes and explains why the decision is being requested and what its impacts are planned to be. So
you're saying then there wouldn't be any further paperwork that would go to the committees that would be more detailed? Because I'm now confused, because I thought you were saying they were going to look into things in more detail.
I'm coming there. The first point. If I
could possibly ask that on the answers to members, we come to the question a bit quicker, if possible.
I'm trying to, Chair. So firstly, we are maintaining the transparency we've always had. Secondly, what we are looking at is the concept of each programme having a delivery plan. Now, this is all a bit nascent, because we haven't got a complete delivery plan for any programme yet. In fact, I've got the first one in draft at the moment to comment on as much about structure rather than the kind of content of the decision. And what we are trying to do with the delivery plan is basically say, OK, this is what the mayor wants this programme to do. What's the best way of doing it? How are we going about it? What resources have we got? How are we working with partners? What are we doing? And then that delivery plan, when approved, and be approved by the mayor through mayoral decision, that delivery plan becomes public. And what we have to look at then, and we haven't got there, so I can't answer quite to how this will work yet, is the delivery plan isn't intended to be something that is we did that and that's done for the mayoral term and we now know what we're doing about building new homes or cleaning London air or whatever it may be, but it's supposed to be a live document that updates as new developments come along. And that then should tie in to our performance reporting and will tie into our budget monitoring as well. And so, yeah, as I say, this is all to be worked out, but the question is, how do we get our performance reporting processes right so that we are giving very clear visibility on a quarterly basis on where we are with each of these programs in terms of progress against delivery, why they're trying to do what they're trying to do, any changes of approach, and also, you know, the financial side of that tied in with our budget position and our future forecasts and running budget processes. So we're trying to make it a much more live, dynamic process ultimately, which then the Assembly will have access to, and the relevant the relevant Assembly committees will then be able to engage in what is being done and why, and obviously the Budget and Performance Committee will be able to look at overall trends and any issues related to GLA delivery performance.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there, Chair, because I know there are a number of colleagues wanted to come in on this area as well. Thank you very much, Chief of Staff.
Thank you, David. And just say, I think Assembly Member Cooper asked two really clear questions of what she was looking for in an answer there. One around Richard Watts chairing committees. I didn't hear an answer to that.
Sorry, I did miss that point.
Yeah, we went slightly round the park and the houses and got back to not answering the question. Just please, if we can try and directly answer the question, because I know I'd like you to get back to doing other things, and I'm sure the Assembly wants to press on. So if we try and answer directly the question, and I'm sure Assembly members will ask you for the context if they felt it didn't make sense. Moving on to Assembly Member Russell.
Cool. So I want to ask about the mandates and what the introduction of mandates is going to mean in relation to the mayoral decision process.
So the mandate is basically, we're just going back to programme management best practice, and the mandate is a commission document for a programme. Yeah. And so what it will then mean is that the delivery plan and the decision approving that comes up to the mayor is informed by what the mayor wants to see from that particular programme. And so it doesn't directly hit the decision process, but it influences what that subsequent decision is.
Okay, so it influences the sort of the outcome, the kind of outcomes that you're trying to achieve. And how many mandates are you expecting?
So there'll be one for each programme. Let's say I think we're in the region of 18 to 20 programmes across the group.
So 18 to 20 mandates?
Yeah, and they're designed to be short documents because all the detail is supposed to flow into the delivery plans.
Okay, and so are there any specific changes that we would expect to see in the mayoral decisions that we end up looking at?
So I don't think we're talking about decisions to the structure of the form. Yeah, clearly the decision that says, right, the mayor's asked to approve this delivery plan, you won't have seen those words in the decision before, and then, it's the content of those delivery plans and the interplay with subsequent decisions to realise what the plan set out that will be the difference.
Mm-hmm. And you say there are 18 to 20 mandates. What happens to some of the smaller programmes that maybe don't fit neatly into a particular mandate or kind of possibly fit into several mandates? Have you kind of thought about that?
Yeah, so we spent quite a bit of time looking at what the programme structure should be. What we realised, some of the member will know that we've established the GLA budget around themes, so transport, the economy, environment, etc. What we realised was that actually programmes are generally cross-cutting in their nature. Yeah, and so quite a bit of time went into thinking about what those programmes should be to best encompass what that work is. So, you know, for instance, if you're doing things to reduce, emissions from transport, or the emissive rights of transport thing, but it's got health benefits. It's got if you can reduce congestion, it's got economy benefits and so forth. So, we thought about all that in the design. The other thing to say is we are trying to restate the role of the GLA as a strategic authority for London, and we're trying to ensure that these programmes are about trying to address strategic challenges, like it might be making the best use of land, it might be building new homes, very clear things that Londoners would expect us to do, and so we need to test our activity to ensure that it is supporting strategic change.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think that does me on. The one other question on the mandates. I think it was expected they were going to be published by early autumn. Are you expecting to publish the mandates soon?
We haven't worked out precisely the publication plan. There are still one or two being finalised. But they are going to definitely influence, and the content flows through into the GLA Mayor budget that we will publish in, where are we now, 2.5 weeks?
Mm-hmm. So once the budget is published, the mandates will be available as well? We haven't worked out the kind of, because they're a new thing, quite the right route in for this yet and where to put them, if you like, but they're not going to be secret. Okay.
No, the content of them absolutely informs the budget, because in total it's saying this is what the GLA is focusing on to deliver for the mayor. Mm-hmm. So not much should be sitting outside those mandates, to your previous question. Mm-hmm. But I think you will see how they feed into our work very clearly in the draft budget document.
Thank you. And then, can we have a forward plan on mayoral decisions?
The short answer would be no. We've rehearsed this at meetings with party group leaders before. What we are trying to do, though, is I think the delivery plan will actually become a proxy for that, because it will show the upcoming areas of work and give the opportunity for the Assembly to kind of engage at that earlier strategic level, as well as post-decision scrutiny when decisions have been made.
So you're saying that you see the delivery plan as a proxy for a forward plan, but is there can you just give me your absolute reasoning why the answer is no to a forward plan?
I think three things. Firstly, I think an approach based on delivery is and what we're planning to do is a better one, because a lot of the things that we do, for instance, through work through partners, may not need a decision form. So you need to engage with that. Second is an issue around around timing and keeping our process flowing. It is fair to say that mayoral decisions, I see a forward plan, and some of them come through very rapidly, some of them move backwards based on contingencies of what's happening. And thirdly, as touched on earlier, a number of decisions are held back for announcement purposes, and if you reveal a forward plan, well then you've revealed your announcement, and so it doesn't work.
Okay, thank you. That's very, very clear. So we will look to the delivery plan as the best proxy we have for the forward plan.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Georgiou.
That whole exchange, David and Mary, sort of just made me think to myself, David, you opened with you wanted things to become less bureaucratic. It seems like the opposite of that has happened. And what's happened to the good old days of, a man or a woman sitting behind a desk as Mayor of London, making the decision, publishing it, and it be open to scrutiny? Because it sounds like we've put... Perhaps you could enlighten me as to how this process has evolved over 3 successive mayoralties, because it sounds like we've become more bureaucratic, not less, but I'm happy to be corrected.
So obviously I wasn't here under previous mayoralties, so it's hard for me. This is possibly where we miss Assemblymember Duval. I don't know, Assemblymember McCartney might have one or two things to add. What I know from the limited thing I know about previous mayoralties was that under Ken Livingstone, he had a Monday morning meeting of all his mayoral advisors, which will have served a similar purpose. And under Boris Johnson as mayor, there was it an investment and performance board? I apologise if I haven't got the name quite right, which considered not all, but a great number of mayoral decisions. And the goal with what we're always trying to achieve is absolutely accountability, because we're very clear that's why we have the individual decision maker model. And you look at the mayoral decision, the mayor's signature is on the front page. He has signed it, he has approved it. We absolutely have that accountability. And we are trying to also bring speed to the process, which is why Mayoral Delivery Board meets every week. Some meetings may be very short, others may be much longer, dependent on what there is to discuss, so that we get that speed of decision making. But also we get the coordination, because that's what Londoners expect too. They expect us at City Hall, the wider GLA group, to be coordinated in our work and in our decision making. And London is a big and complex place, and that does require some processes to achieve.
Thank you, David. And I think you and Mary are selling yourself short, because to change what was previously in place, you would have had to have known what was there in the first instance. Therefore, changing it, you would have known what you were changing it to. But anyway, that's by the by. With regard to the process that Assemblymember Russell was talking through, so decision, so DD 2703, which was for universal free school meals. Obviously very comprehensive in its analysis, the reason why the policy was being passed, the mayor's priorities, and how the money would be spent. What was not immediately clear is that during the mayoral election, the mayor promised for the remainder of his term, so this current term, there would be free school meals every year. So two questions. Number one, will we continue passing that decision on an annual basis rather than over a 4-year period? And rather than us waiting for budget time, is there any way of finding out, given that we know it will be every year, how that will be funded?
Yeah. So okay, how to quickly explain that. So obviously there is a difference between a budget, which just sets out the funding envelope for something, and the decision form, which actually specifies around how it will be spent and is the formal decision, which is subject to judicial review and all that, which is another reason why it's got to be set out properly. It is possible for a decision to be made that covers multiple years' expenditure, certainly. The question is, when considering do that, will be, one, is the budget, are we comfortable that the budget is available? Because when we commit it, we've committed it, and colleagues will remember the pandemic and how we were very concerned for our income levels, and you don't take formal decisions to commit and lock yourself into contracts unless it's a good thing to do. So that's always the first consideration. And then the second consideration is whether, through the budget process, we can lock in that funding across the four-year period. And that is, in terms of free school meals specifically, that is something we will look at through the group budget process this winter, and we'll decide, whether we can be confident in that, or whether, for instance, we need to wait until the government's multi-year spending review.
Final question, Chair. And apologies if I misheard you, David. It sounded almost as if you said the reason why the free school meal decision is being taken on an annual rather than on a mayoral term basis is because we can't guarantee that it will happen or the funding will be there in over successive years. Is that correct?
So, I mean, Parliament is sovereign. and therefore there is no guarantees about any of our funding because Parliament giveth and Parliament taketh away. So in that context, it's a matter of judgment about do we take decisions that just spend money for one academic year, of course crosses 2 financial years in instance of free school meals, or do we take longer term decisions? And yeah, that's something we have to think about. The other thing we have to think about that I should have said and didn't is, of course, we would try in the administration of any scheme to learn from previous years, and we always need to keep ourselves open, don't we, for differences in approach around implementation based on feedback. And so do we want to take a decision which is a directed decision, lock down some of those specifics, or do we want to keep that open and be able to give ourselves more options based on what the learning is? And that'll be the consideration.
Thank you. Assembly Member Mafusen, can I just ask both David and Bassam if you keep it fairly tight?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair. So just quickly to clarify your answer to Assembly Member Russell, because I was going to ask about timetable and in terms of the impact on the budget. So are you saying today that we will get all of the mandates signed off within 2.5 weeks?
So all the mandates will influence the GLA mayor budget. Some of them will influence the budgets of functional bodies as well, which come on a slightly later time frame. They're due to be submitted on 22nd of November, their draft budget submissions. And so, we need to work out quite how we publish, but you will see an alignment between what the mandates are saying and what the budgets are saying.
So,
and also,
so I appreciate where you're getting to with that, David, just conscious of time. So could we get from you then perhaps a timetable of when we will expect those mandates to be published?
Yeah, we can look at that.
Fantastic, thank you. And then it strikes me one of the key mayoral decisions is effectively what the scope is in terms of what's included within these 18 to 20 mandates and what isn't. And so opportunity to scrutinise that particular decision. Will that be an opportunity that will come back to us as oversight, or would you envisage that being part of the budget and performance process?
So the decision will be ultimately around the delivery plan. So that will be the formal decision, and the mandate just feeds it as an input into that. It's very much for the Assembly to decide, obviously, how you do your scrutiny. I would really, if I was allowed an opinion, would encourage the Assembly to be able to use its committees as much as possible in terms of how it does oversight around delivery in particular areas, because obviously each committee will be the one with the real specialist knowledge. And obviously you have to balance that against a kind of corporate system-wide view that either Budget and Performance Committee or this committee might provide.
And I think when you see the types of programmes, I think you'll see some good matches with some of the committees.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely clearly a way to go. Clearly an opportunity to focus on delivery in this particular term, and I look forward to seeing the timetable and the final mandates. Thanks.
Brilliant. Well, can I thank both David and Mary for joining us for that discussion, and can I ask the committee to note the report as background, put in questions to the invited guests, and note the subsequent discussion? Noted. And on the next item around delegation of output rising, I do think that the group leads need to come together and think about how we do mayoral decisions in future, and probably let David and the team know how we want to do that. So that will probably form part of that, if that's okay with members. So delegate authority to the chairman in consultation with the deputy chair and party group lead members to agree any output arising from the discussion. Many thanks. You may leave. Thank you. Hopefully Helen is waiting in the wings, and so can I ask on the GLA Oversight Committee work plan if the committee is happy to note its work programme for 24-25? Thank you. And then with the committee's permission, can we move items 12 and 12A to this point in the agenda?
Agreed.
Agreed, thanks. There are no items that I consider urgent. Onto the Assembly Budget Requirements Pack. We would like to welcome Helen Ewan to the Chamber. And I will let you sit down. And if it's okay, Helen, I'm going to pass straight to Assembly Member Mahfouz, I think, for a question on this.
Thank you, Helen. And just a very quick one. It's not to challenge the actual proposals, but just to understand the assumptions and growth under some of the lines, because some of the lines have relatively modest increases from year on year, which you'd expect are inflationary increases, whereas others have got far higher percentages. And then, of course, some don't have any growth at all or go down in terms of numbers. So just what assumptions have gone into the figures in front of us?
An Assembly Member, you've hit on some of the difficulty of bringing this paper at this point in the cycle, I guess, as compared to what the committee will receive from me in March, which will be a kind of much more helpful, I guess, year-on-year comparator. I mean, what you have here for 24-25 is our known and well understood live position. What you've got for 25-26 and beyond is a much more estimated position based on our core establishment, our staff establishment. I mean, this is predominantly about pay bill, really. I'm happy to provide this, actually. The non-pay across all of our teams stays pretty static. So this is about shifts in pay bill, and it's absolutely about the basis on which estimates are made and the kind of staffing numbers and assumptions that are made in future years. So the 25-26 position and beyond is about the core establishment picture. So those posts we have that are approved. The current numbers are much more about the live position in teams, and that's why that comparison feels slightly odd. The March position will be much more specifically about the humans and the actual costs associated with those humans that will land for us in 25-26 and will be much more accurate on that basis.
And that's it. Yeah, it'd be great to get that information sent over. Thank you, Helen.
Thanks for joining. You thought we were going to let you off, didn't you? Like normal. Okay, thanks. This is one of the longer ones, I'm afraid. Can I ask the committee to agree to the London Assembly's core draft budget requirement for 25-26 as set out at section 7 of this report for recommendation to the Mayor, subject to any changes prior to the final agreement on the budget in February 25 to reflect any further evidence from the Chief Finance Officer on contingencies and financial reserves and any changes that emerge during the remainder of the budget process?
Agreed.
Thank you. Agree to submit the additional resource requirements set out at section 9 of the report for recommendation to the Mayor.
Agreed.
Note the potential areas of additional spend in 25-26 which could be met through use of the Assembly reserves subject to further approvals by this committee.
Noted.
Thank you. Noted the detailed allocation of 25-26 Assembly budget will be presented to this committee for consideration and decision in March 2025 following confirmation of the overall GLA group budget for 25-26 in February 2025. Thank you. And to approve the general use of the Assembly's budget as allocated to the relevant teams within the Secretariat by the committee in March each year as set out in section 5 of this report. Approved, but yeah, it's a good test, that one, wasn't it? Right. Thank you, everybody. So moving on to our second principal item of business for today, London's New Year's Eve fireworks event.
I'm just going to admit.
Okay, thank you. And firstly, we'd like to welcome Phil Grucci, who I can't see yet, who's joining us on Zoom, the Chief Executive Officer and Creative Director for Grucci Middle East Event Organisers, LLC. I can see you now, Phil. Brilliant. Good morning to you. I believe you're in New York, so thank you very much for joining us this morning. We really appreciate your time. And if I could
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Thank you. If I could just open up with my first question to you on how you think London's 23 to 24 New Year's Eve fireworks display compared to other major fireworks displays in the world.
Well, it's certainly in the top 10. We've been very fortunate to produce some of those also in the top 10 firework displays, such as the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. We produced that program a number of times. Las Vegas, the Taipei 101, Ras Al Khaimah now is a new entry into the top 10, if you will. All of those programs we've produced, but we've always watched and and witnessed the expansion of the London performance, and it's highly respected within the industry, as well as within the media attention that happens on New Year's Eve. Las Vegas, I mean, New York is another one, but it's not necessarily on that list because of fireworks. It's on that list because of just the history of a New Year's Eve celebration in New York. So going down the list, Burj Khalifa, Australia, Ras Al Khaimah, New York, Las Vegas, Taipei 101, London, Ras Al Khaimah, Copacabana, and Paris are the ones that we would rate as the top 10 related to fireworks.
Thank you. Top 10's obviously good. I think we would all hope to be number one in the world. Is there anything that you think that we could learn from other cities, especially around attendance, making sure that it is the greatest spectacle at New Year in the world?
Sure. I mean, I think part of the benefit of all of the programs in the top 10, and I would probably venture to say, from an exposure perspective, London is probably in the top 5. Really, if you wanted to, and I'm not just saying that because of the audience, but because you have such a unique skyline, you have a unique theater to perform in with the water, with the river, as well as the London Eye, the wheel itself. It's a very interesting theater. And then the way the audience is organized, which seems to be very organized and concentrated in a location covering the immediate area around the river, but also the city itself. I think that's what attributes to London's success. I think areas that other elements that will be added, I'm sure, such as drones. I know everybody is speaking of drones, and we may get down to that question in this meeting, but other mediums to add to it. You have quite an extensive and impressive lighting show that is on the London Eye as well, and then also expanding down the river. I guess those are the areas whenever you see a performance get to a point where it's maybe capped out or at its ceiling, is then expanding it to a larger theater. Most of the large performances and they're highly recognized are expanding or expansive theaters. The project that we produced in Ras Al Khaimah and what we've done on the Burj Khalifa in the past, you're talking about 5-6 kilometers of space that's being covered. So you do have a theater to be able to do that, but the other mediums may bring it to another level as well. The mediums such as drones, pyro drones, and more expansive lighting performance as well.
Yeah, that's exactly what my follow-up question was going to be, because you briefly mentioned drones. Is that the future, or where do drones come versus fireworks? And is that the key to unlocking more geographical space as part of these events?
It's a very good question, and I have to say, in the last 3 years, I've answered, particularly on Independence Day in the United States, because of the perceived environmental lack of impact, which certainly I have a different opinion on that, and many people do once you look at the actual facts of the argument. But the addition of drones, in our opinion, and it's been proven, is not a replacement for a firework display because of the environmental impact. What it is, it's another medium that gets added to a multimedia display, which is similar to what you have in London. You have fireworks, you also have the audio, you also have the lights, and you have beautiful structures with Big Ben and the other structures that are fired from the London Eye to complete that performance. So the drones are a great medium to add. They have a phenomenal impact as it relates to marketing. You can tell the story using drones because you can get some very detailed images and place them in a large scale that can be seen for thousands of feet, and in some cases, depending on the environment, miles away. And then those that are in the immediate audience, it's a tremendous impact. But as a replacement for fireworks, it's not. I don't believe the medium sustains the excitement, sustains the power the dynamics that fireworks bring. Fireworks will basically touch every one of your senses. The drones pretty much is only your sense of vision, what you see in the sky. The fireworks add that dynamic, that larger than life look and feel. So we've successfully incorporated, we own a fleet of our own drones that we've successfully integrated into the program. And now in the United States, at least, we just received last April the exemption from the FAA, which is the regulatory body obviously controlling the airspace, to add pyrotechnics to the drones. We have been using pyrotechnics on drones for the last 5 years now in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia, and in the UAE. In fact, we captured the first Guinness World Record with the largest drone swarm that had pyrotechnics on them. So, and then speaking of the environmental impact, fireworks certainly have environmental impact like many other mediums do. Just the vehicles that come to an event like this has an environmental impact. The drones are not free of environmental impact. They do have charging that has to take place. There's generators that are running. There's power. There's electricity that's being used. And then there is the battery that has a certain shelf life or a useful life that has to be disposed of properly. So they're not necessarily free of an environmental impact from our opinion and what we've studied in using them in our performances. So we have a very regimented process, just like we do with fireworks, as far as trying to do our best to reduce that footprint. Certainly on the fireworks side, you got the carbon footprint, as you do when you're running a generator. We've had studies done here in the United States through the American Pyrotechnics Association just recently on the air quality impact of a firework display in 49 different monitored cities. And the carbon footprint, although short in duration, pales to some of the other impacts that are related to special events, again, such as the masses of generators, the masses of vehicles, the masses of people in general that are coming to an event like that.
I'm going to Phil.
So I'm sorry, I should stop and take a breath and let you ask some follow-up questions. I apologize for that.
No, that's fine. Just we will have a section on the environmental impact coming up,
Sure,
so
sure.
there'll be time to consider that more
fully. I only
fully.
say that because of the drone argument that's
Sure.
made, that has been made. So I had about 30 media interviews this last Independence Day in the United States. And they all asked me this question about drones taking over fireworks. And many of them came back with that they did their homework, that 2 years ago, 2 Independence Days ago, there were about 15 municipalities that changed from fireworks and had a drone show on Independence Day. And this year, all of those 15 municipalities all went back to including their fireworks again. Some of them included fireworks with the drones, which is music to our ears. It's an appropriate reaction, but all of them came back with their traditional fireworks display. So that's a metric to look at as it relates to are they a medium to replace the firework displays?
Thank you. I'm going to pass over to Assembly Member Mahfouz.
Thank you, and good morning, Phil, if you're in New York. What I wanted to just ask you was, clearly you talked about London being in the top 10, top 5 fireworks displays in the world, which is a brilliant position to be in. Currently, we've got a 5-year contract in terms of our provider on that, and clearly you're providing world-class fireworks in different parts of the world year after year. So I'm going to ask you, what's the secret to ensuring innovation and staying ahead of the game to make sure that London continues to be one of the world-class fireworks displays year after year?
Well, part of that is picking the right partners that you're working with. In your case, you have the overarching event production, which is crowd management and all of that, that could make or break the success of a program, no matter how much creative, how much innovation you put into it. If the event is not produced properly, that could be problematic. It seems like you have a company that you're working with that, at least from my perspective, I haven't heard any negatives. You obviously are much deeper into the weeds, as we would say. But the first thing is to select that proper partner to produce an event such as this. And then related to the innovation, that the overarching event producer is then selecting their partners that are creating the actual show, on the fireworks show, the lighting show, the audio, music composition. So those providers, those producers are critical to shaking it up, if you will, and changing it up and working all year long, January 2nd, working on what you're going to do next year to top the year before that. So we're very fortunate. I'm down actually in Virginia. I'm not in New York. I've got a manufacturing facility in Southern Virginia with 170 employees. So we often look at what are we going to create. We don't make all of our products, but we do develop and make some of them, and we then go to our suppliers in Europe and in Asia to select what we're going to introduce this year that's going to be different. So the chemistry of fireworks has been pretty stable. So the new effects, yes, they're there, but the new mediums, and I hate to come back to drones, but it's a reality, is how you're using them in the program, and then what you're putting on them, such as lasers, such as lighting, such as pyrotechnics, and those other mediums. And then also looking at how can you use and I say this cautiously, the props that you have in the theater. The theater, you have the river, you have the London Eye, you have the tower, you have other architectural beauties that are in that environment to bring that program to the next level up. So what the public has seen year after year, and believe me, I've been monitoring your show. You have a very good firework company that's producing it, I will say. I know them personally, but it's one of those, as everybody would look at, it's one of those programs that you'd love to produce because it is so iconic. So to answer your question in a long-winded way, it's the selection of your partners and what they can bring to the table for that innovation, that they're bringing new technologies, new methodologies, and then also looking at expanding that theater to something that it's not the same every year. It's not just the London Eye and the river every year with an occasional firing off the tower.
Thank you, Phil.
We found success with broadening the scope. Now that all relates to budget too, so you have to be realistic about how big you really can make it based on a reasonable budget.
Thank you, Phil. Well, London's certainly a big place, so there's certainly scope, and obviously COVID gave an opportunity to expand the theatre considerably.
Yeah.
Before I come to the question of cost, which you've touched upon, we are going to be talking later on in the meeting when you're not with us about there was a change in the type of contract that we had. So previously it was annual, it moved to I believe a 5-year contract. So just linking back to the ability to deliver those innovations year after year, from your point of view, is it better to have an annual or short-term contract or a slightly longer-term contract as we've got in place?
Well, from the firework company, from my perspective, I've always leaned towards and proposed to have a longer-term contract. It gives us, one, the confidence to invest in the program, whether it be equipment, whether it be specialized equipment. For example, on the London Eye, all of that equipment is specialized. It's not something that you would typically use on a fireworks show, say in a pitch or a ball field. So the consistency in developing the product, in placing the manufacturing orders early enough, in booking the proper talent, because New Year's Eve is a highly sought after day. So those resources become very scarce. So by all means, a multi-year contract is the best way to go. Plus it saves you a lot of time, where you know who the players are in the field that can produce the program. If you have a current supplier that's innovating and bringing something new, then a multi-year program works for you. If it becomes stale and they're not bringing things that are new, then, from a cost perspective, it'll probably work for you, but maybe not from a creative perspective. But I would always vote for a multi-year contract.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Phil, for that clarity. And in terms of your experience, could you tell us what the key costs associated with large-scale fireworks are, without going to any of the commercial sensitive elements? Sure. Clearly, there's been considerable inflation over recent years on some of these costs. So what are those key costs? And linked to that, perhaps, Phil, if you could tell us how we would look to optimise that budget to get the best bang for our buck.
So it's a good way of putting it. Very relative and always referenced that way. Certainly the key costs are naturally the fireworks, the medium, because it's an expendable. So that's something you can invest in and amortize over three years or 5 years. So the cost of fireworks is not immune to the inflationary increases that we're seeing for chemicals, materials, transportation of explosives. So the fireworks is one key cost factor. The other one is labor. The experienced pyrotechnics that can rig a project like the London Eye and the barges and the floating platforms in the river. Insurance continues to go up regardless of what your loss runs are. You can have an impeccable loss run, but insurance rates are still going through the ceiling. The water costs for your barges and the activities that are on the river, all of those, transportation of the explosives, certainly those explosives have got to come from the suppliers. You being in Europe, the transportation may be a little less expensive because it's coming from there's multiple suppliers in Europe, Italy, Spain, Portugal, that reduces that transportation cost as compared to the United States, that we experience everything that's coming by ocean or airplane. The security of the fireworks location, the water cost to secure the river, to secure the area around the London Eye. Rigging, that becomes a big one when you have a specialized location that you're firing from. And certainly the risk assessments, specialized equipment, because it's such a sought after day. Our New Year's Eve, just to give you an estimate, our Independence Day is our second largest season. New Year's Eve is about 50% larger. The equipment, the firing systems, the electronics that are very expensive become one of the limiting resources to do a precise program like you have in London. It's very technically driven, that program. So those are the key expenses, not including the municipal expenses and everything that's involved in crowd control.
Sure, but that's from an industry perspective. That's the cost that you're having to deal with.
Correct.
If you were to identify maybe one or two of those items which are perhaps the highest pressure in terms of inflation, what that looks like on a reality basis. So is it the cost of the fireworks themselves or a different aspect? And what sort of inflationary pressures have you seen?
It's if I could throw a third one in there, if you don't mind, I would say that fireworks for sure, the labor and the transportation. The transportation of explosives is a very challenging activity and cost. It's costly.
Thank you. And then in terms of just on that labour point, you've talked about security, and we've seen increasing pressure around providing extra security at these large-scale events across Europe. I'm sure it's been replicated in the US. Certainly post-pandemic, there's been greater challenges around entry to these events with more QR codes. Absolutely. And so on. So what have you seen from an inflationary or from additional resourcing point of view on security side?
Security is generally not in the scope of the firework company. So I'm speaking on behalf of the industry, as you mentioned before, of security of the waterway, closing the waterway off. That does come into effect sometimes on the firework scope. The security of the audience and the general public is generally the production side. I would would anticipate that has gone up just as the other line items I just mentioned, equally if not more. But because the head count has gone up, maybe the rate per person that a company would charge may go up according to inflation, but the head counts are going up, which is increasing the budget because of the number of people that are needed to secure properly these masses of audience. That's what we're seeing. We're seeing, 20, 25% more security people are needed now to adequately, depending on how you define adequately secure a mass of 200,000 people, or 1 million for that matter, in some of these markets that we're in.
That's really helpful. Thank you very much. I'll pass back.
Thank you. Assembly Member Bakari.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try not to show off with any flashy puns like my previous colleague. I want to talk a little bit more about costs, actually, and also referring back to some of the original comments that you were making about the carbon footprint. What are the costs associated with reducing the carbon footprint for large-scale events?
The costs associated from a fireworks perspective is primarily reducing quantity. Sometimes the drones and other medium like the lights and things like that would offer an opportunity not to have fireworks firing while, say, a beautiful image is up in the sky with the drone. So creatively, you can reduce the footprint of the fireworks from a carbon perspective. But I do want to highlight the carbon footprint of a firework display is not as impacting as the general public perceives it to be, as compared to the other reductions that could be made in the event itself as it relates to a carbon footprint, and also the particulate that's in the sky. Certainly it depends on also the environment, the weather, the wind, the humidity and such in the sky. So visibly it looks with the smoke that a fireworks show produces. But reducing volume certainly is one way of doing that, and without reducing the impact of the performance. And that's a creative element on when you are very saturated in the sky with fireworks and when you're not. A fireworks show does not have to be a finale from the beginning to the end. And most New Year's Eve performances are very short. They're not the typical 20-minute ooh and ah, where the audience is watching a fireworks show for an extended period of time. So sometimes we fall into the trap of an 8-minute performance, shooting 20 minutes of fireworks in 8 minutes because we believe that the volume is what's going to give you a beautiful program. That's not the case. Too much of a good thing is a bad thing. So that's one way. There are some selections of products that are that have more carbon to them, such as the willows and the charcoal-based pyrotechnic compositions. But we don't put a great deal of attention to looking at the colors and the types of products that we use. We look at the volume, because from a creative perspective, it also is a benefit as well as an environmental perspective.
And you were also talking about the impact that drones and combining drones with fireworks in a display. Can you talk a little bit more about, again, the cost of that and also the impact that it has on the event attendee experience? So let's say, for example, that there was a decision to have more drones than fireworks, or even no fireworks and just drones. Does that impact the attendee experience and the cost?
It definitely impacts the cost. A drone performance, depending on the quantity. Drones are limited based on duration. Many of them are 10, 12, 15 minutes, depending on the type of drone equipment that's being used. That could be in the sky at any given time. You can extend it by multiple fleets putting up phasing them within the program. But by and large, the cost of a drone performance as compared to the cost of a fireworks performance is about 3 times more than a fireworks display would be. If you had, for example, in London, you wouldn't produce anything less than 600 to 1,000 drones because of the because of what the images most likely should be in order to have an impact with a drone performance. Small municipal programs are generally around 200 to 300 drones. So that's hundreds of thousands of dollars to produce something like that. So it by itself, I would say with great confidence, the audience would walk away not thrilled if it was just drones. Combining the drones with the fireworks and even adding pyrotechnics onto the drone, then you have a multimedia experience that they would walk away from seeing something of a scale up than what they've seen in the past.
My last question is just, why is this so important to get it right, particularly for in terms of the experiences that, for example, you've worked on Olympic Games, you've even done Republican National Convention. There are obviously reasons behind making sure that you've got a good show, but when it isn't a good show, does that reflect badly on the country that you're doing your display in, or even the leadership of that country, the government? Tell me about the impact of having a good show against a bad show for particularly for the government or the leadership of that place.
Sure. So it's all of the above. Certainly, if we produce a bad show, the ripple effect on that bad show, you may have heard the old saying, "You're only as good as your last performance," right? So the ripple effect of a bad show does affect certainly who selected us. If it's a municipally driven program and that company or that country or that city brings in a supplier that produces a bad show, immediately you're going to look at, what did you pay for it? Did you drive the price down? You got, the saying, you got what you paid for. You're not paying for a quality company to produce it. And then the brand, our brand, we're a sixth generation since 1850. We've been in business producing firework displays. So our brand with a bad show would be tarnished certainly in the city that we've produced the show in. But the industry is very small and the world is very small these days. And it would ripple through the world very quickly if there was a bad performance. We just produced a show just a week and a half ago, and you may have even heard about it because it went on the wire and went pretty viral, the implosion of the Tropicana Hotel in Las Vegas. And we produced the fireworks, the drones, the pyro drones, the lighting, sound, the whole production, multimedia production, and then worked very closely with the demolition company to drop the buildings as the finale of the event. And there were so many moving parts and details to that. If that was a bad performance, with the amount of exposure that program had, it would be irreparable. We would not be able to recover from the negativity of something like that. We're fortunate that we're involved in very high-profile programs, but my hairline is where it is because there is a tremendous amount of pressure to assure that there's backups, there's redundancies to avoid what would be defined as a good show or a bad show.
Thank you. I mean, I think in terms of the reflection it does have on the city, and if we did have a bad show, it would look bad on the Mayor of London as well. Thank you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You couldn't recover from it. You'd have that black eye for at least a year.
Thanks, Phil. One final question from me just before you go is, are there any other asks perhaps you make or that you see working well that a city can do to drive attendance, alongside the fireworks or drone displays?
Well, it's the experience. Part of it is the experience when they arrive. If there's other activities that are planned around the finale of the night, which is the midnight moment. We have had in other markets small firework displays leading up to the pinnacle moment. We've had other light shows where you can entertain the audience while they're gathering, giving them a pleasurable experience other than just the 10 minutes that they're waiting for hours for the performance to happen. And this is specifically on a New Year's Eve performance because it's so late in the evening and they have to get there so early. Other entertainment mediums are always a good idea to do, and it also gives you the opportunity to possibly hit other time zones. So if you're doing something short but sweet for those that are there, but it's also covered in the media, you get another opportunity to grab some attention from the media side as well.
Thanks. That's a really interesting point to end on. So can I thank you again, Phil, for joining us. That was really helpful. We're going to have a discussion now with the GLA officers that are part of putting on our assemblies or our mayoral fireworks display. Assembly doesn't quite have a fireworks display yet. So thank you very much for your time, Phil, and we look forward to perhaps seeing you again one day to hear about other things we can be doing in London better for our fireworks event.
I'd be happy to do so, and I'm very honored to be before this group. So thank you very much for having me.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Phil.
that.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thanks. Okay, can I just ask the committee now to break 5 minutes, be back at 36 promptly. Thank you. Can I welcome everybody back to the tail end of our oversight meeting today, and welcome Nicole Valentinuzzi, Assistant Director of External Relations for the GLA, and David Holly, Head of Events for London GLA, to the second part of our discussion on London's New Year's Eve fireworks event. And if I could open, perhaps, I don't know who is best placed to take this and decide between yourselves, but by asking what preparations have already been made for this year's fireworks events, and what key changes, if any, have you made from the previous year?
Hello. So our approach to preparation for this year's event has been informed by an extensive debrief process post-event that included all of our partners and key stakeholders, including the police and other blue light agencies, local authorities and other key stakeholders. For planning for the 2024 event, we have focused on what worked well and how we can improve these areas, as well as specifically what we need to do better. Specifically for this year, we have reviewed the crowd management plan. We have reviewed and reconfigured the infrastructure. We have looked and reviewed at the event perimeter. We have reviewed our installation times of infrastructure. We've reviewed the ticketing areas and the entrances and exits. We have spent specific time looking at the Zone X areas, which are areas outside of an event footprint. And we have looked at the control room structure to ensure that decision-making is done efficiently. We have also had continuous liaison with the Metropolitan Police Service.
Thanks, David. And one thing that I found interesting that was that last year, 23, 24, it's very hard.
It is easier, just say last year, yeah.
It was very interesting to see there was less attendance in person and then substantially more viewers on the BBC. Do you monitor attendance and online viewings kind of as both as important, or is there one you weight as we really want to see this number of figures on the TV figures? How do you balance that?
Shall I?
Go on.
So the in-person attendance is really dictated by the crowd management plans that we work on with all the partners that David mentioned. So those numbers stay fairly static, depending on how we might look to change the footprint, and we can possibly talk about some of that separately. The broadcast figures are obviously an incredible achievement and something that we look to increase every year. So last year, the most watched programme on the BBC, I think we even beat out Strictly and Eurovision. So that is setting the bar for us. So I wouldn't say at this point in time, trying to increase the in-person attendance is not necessarily an objective at this point.
Thank you. And how are you monitoring and evaluating the performance of Identity, the event delivery and production partner, to ensure they deliver the event to the agreed standards?
So as part of the debrief process, we discuss the approach and delivery of the contracted services and explore good practice, the lessons learned and areas for improvement with the event production company. These discussions are then taken forward and put into the scope of works, which is then used as the basis for procuring the company for the next year. So the issuing of the scope of works ensures that any issues are addressed in the proposal for the planning and delivery of the event. And this year we are satisfied with the proposal that the event production company has put forward. I think it's important to say that as...
Can I just confirm that I heard correctly that within the longer-term contract there is the ability to change the scope of works?
Correct. So
okay.
we contract the production company for 4 years, but each year we have the opportunity to, and it's necessary actually, to be able to ensure that what they are proposing reflects the requirements of the event. I think it's also just important to say that we don't wait until the end of the year to evaluate Identity's performance. Sorry, Identity are the event production company. We also do that continually throughout the year with weekly meetings where we look at budgets, we review the budgets, we review the risk register, we look at timelines and operations and make sure that everything is being delivered as it should. And I guess it's also just worth saying that we also undertake a financial audit after the event.
Thank you. And can I ask David, is LS Events involved in any of the preparations for this year's New Year's Eve fireworks?
No.
And are they currently, or do they have any existing contracts with the GLA for upcoming events?
Yes, they do. They have a contract for Diwali on the Square, which is actually on Sunday, and St Patrick's Day.
Very interesting. I just had one more question. And last year, we saw the events advertised by the Mayor as my fireworks event on Twitter. This year, that language has changed to London's fireworks event. Was that in a marketing kind of conversation? How did that change come about?
I'm not sure that was a deliberate change. We hadn't, there's nothing that came out in the debrief process that needed to change through the marketing for this year. No.
I'll keep thoughts to myself on what might be different from this year to last year. Looking across, I had Assembly Member Bakari and Georgie to come in. So, Assembly Member Bakari.
Thank you, Chair. According to a decision signed by the Mayor in July 2022, the key objectives for the New Year's celebration is to galvanise Londoners behind a core value statement. What does that mean?
So the creative is effectively developed with, as you say, an objective to look across the year that has been, celebrate the key moments. So that is what that refers to.
And how do you make sure that it stays politically neutral, those values?
The creative is... do you want to talk about the process?
Yeah. So the creative show is actually designed by a creative part of the event production company. So they have a creative team who develop that show, and then that is presented for approval to GLA officers, and then that is then shared with the Mayor's office.
And is there any points or suggestions made by the Mayor's office after that point of discussion?
Nothing outwardly. We generally stick with what comes through the creative process.
Who made the decision to have the words that the Mayor of London at the beginning of the fireworks and the last display? Whose decision was that?
That was a decision made it was presented as a show element, and is actually something that has happened before for other New Year's Eve events, not in drones, but through projection on buildings. So it is something that has happened
before. When did those happen?
I will have to check the year, but I think it was 2015, but I will have to double check that.
Were they before a London election by the...
I don't have the answer to that.
Could you tell us and find out where the timing was, specifically whether it was before a London election?
Of course.
Thank you.
Off the back of Assembly Member Bakari's question, you've already stated that based on sort of debriefing and feedback that you've had, work, I guess first question that they're quite advanced in terms of what you'll be doing this year? Yes? Okay. Thank you both. Well, in that case, would you be able to tell us if there will be another publicity stunt for the Mayor as Assembly Member Bakari outlined this year?
The creative show is actually still being developed, so I'm unable to confirm exactly what will be in that.
So just to confirm, you have no knowledge you've not seen anything that relates to this year's show in terms of what will be presented in the display?
No, I have seen some elements of the show. We're currently working on the soundtrack, but I have not seen anything that alludes to the same words in drones that the Assembly member referenced.
So just to confirm, we won't be seeing Mayor of London in drones in London skyline?
We can't confirm any of the details of the final
okay.
show
All right,
at this
yeah.
point.
Yeah, I thought that would be the case.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Could I just confirm, David, coming back to you, when were LS Events contracted for the Diwali Square event?
I'd have to go away and get that information, but I can provide that to you afterwards, certainly.
Brilliant, thank you. Assembly Member Mahfouz.
Thank you. I just want to clarify from what you've seen. You talked about Nicole. It's obviously a look back over the year that has been. We haven't got any drone displays which will show Rishi Sunak on the steps of number 10 with the rain pouring down on him and the music blaring. Things will only get better.
We can't confirm any elements of the creative show this year.
Oh, that's a shame. Okay, just moving on though, in terms of just to ask you, in terms of what strategies are in place to maximise the economic and cultural benefits that the event can offer to Londoners?
As I already explained, we continue to try to reach new audiences with the broadcast specifically. We are looking at how to maximise that online, as you might expect. And there is a clear reason for that. We have, in terms of the audience that ends up attending and the economic value of that, it is a 30% Londoners, 40% wider UK, 30% overseas audience. So that brings in a significant amount of tourist spend.
And in terms of the outcomes that you're seeking to achieve on that, what sort of metrics have you got?
So from our market research from last year, we were able to put out a post-event survey that had nearly 2,500 responses. And within that survey, we asked them a number of questions about their demographics, how they got to the event, what their spend was at the event, and what we were able to work with our city intelligence team on is that on average each attendee spends around £130 by coming to the event, and actually I have some quite interesting stats. So 83% of those who attended were very satisfied with the show, 75% thought it put London in a positive light, 70% said they wouldn't have come to London if it wasn't for the fireworks. And ticket holders said that they visited restaurants, pubs and clubs, which was 61%, shopping 50%, and museums and galleries 32%. So there is economic impact from this event.
And we look to increase those every year.
Some really fantastic stats there. Just to go back on that, was it £135 per person on average spend? Yeah, and that's just on the night itself, or are you talking about sort of potentially that includes hotel spend and so on?
Their spend when they come to the event. Their spend by coming to the event. So by coming to the event, what are they spending their money on? And it was averaged at around £135.
So £135 on the night, obviously for those 30% that are coming from abroad, plus the 40% from elsewhere in the country, they'll have also spent additional money in that week or the weekend that they've come down for. Great. And we are going to be talking about crowd management in a moment, but one of the key metrics, and you said it right at the start there, David, was around the satisfaction level, and you said 83%. So just wanted to compare that to other major events. How does that compare to other major events that we put on?
So the events in Trafalgar Square have a very high rating for satisfaction, between 70 to 80%. So I would say that it's kind of around the same area in regards to the delivery of our events programme. I can't speak for any other events, but yes, certainly for Mayor of London events, it's about the same level of satisfaction.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. And David, can I thank you for the answers you're giving after some particularly lengthy guests. It's really enjoyable. Or easier to manage, I say. Assembly Member Georgiou.
Given a lot of the figures you've thrown about with regard to contributions to nighttime economy, how much involvement has the current Nights Are had in involving this event in previous years?
There is no current Nights
Fine.
Do you mean the former NITAR?
Yeah, I'm, you know, or however you want to describe her, you know, Amy LeMay.
Amy has not been involved in the planning and delivery of this event.
Okay, interesting for a nighttime event, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And just on this section, I was hoping it would be picked up, but I'll just come back to the internal audit report for risk and assurance review, which concluded that there were major weaknesses in controls that exposed business to high risk of loss or exposure in terms of fraud in property, poor value for money, or failure to achieve objectives, and remedial action should be taken immediately. And I know that you began with some of the. I know you began by talking about some of the action that has been taken. So, was there anything else that you wanted to add onto what has come about from that audit?
Can we just ask what section the audit report that was?
That was the audit report of the event.
Oh, I don't recognise that paragraph.
What audit report are you talking about?
The GLA audit report. But I will send you that section if you want.
Sure.
Yes, please.
Yeah, sorry.
Can you talk to the wider point of the...
we can.
So the audit, we received substantial rating, which is the highest rating that you can actually achieve. There was one small recommendation for change, which was within our risk register, having a specific column that highlighted the owner of the mitigations. The document actually did highlight the owner of those mitigations, but it wasn't in a separate column, so we have taken that forward and implemented that recommendation.
Do you want to? Yeah. Would
Thank
like
you.
us to talk about the engagement with business? Is that? Yeah.
If there's anything further to add, then please do.
Sure.
As in our business and resident engagement? Yeah, sure. So we obviously the footprint of the event takes up a huge amount of space in central London, which has a number of residents and businesses. So we undertake a lengthy process to engage with them to ensure that their business as usual can continue and that they are fully aware of the timings and any restrictions that may be going in around the event. So businesses and residents should be fully briefed and aware when the event goes into the build and delivery mode of exactly what to expect.
Thank you. And I've just clarified in the time that's taken. That's page 15. You can find that excerpt that I just said to you. And just one final call from me. Look, the conversations around whether we say presented by the Mayor of London at the beginning or not is kind of by the by. I was really concerned last year that there was an opportunity in celebrating 10 years of equal marriage that we didn't use a voice from the LGBT community. And I would make an ask that we try to use voices that are come from those communities to help with the cultural benefits when that opportunity arises.
Absolutely.
That's something that we'll take away
forward
with the creative company. Yeah.
Just to respond, Chair, to your point about the audit, that page 15 is actually a description of the ratings. That doesn't actually relate to our audit.
Okay, thank you. I will go away and look at that again with our researcher to make sure we're clear on what's happened.
No worries.
Assembly Member McCartney.
Yeah, we just noted it's the definitions of the different things, yes. Yeah, I think you got probably the highest audit rating you can get, actually. Yeah. I want to ask, and my question is to David initially, it's about your opening statement, and I want to ask about crowd management. So we know that some of the feedback last year was that people had issues entering, and I think some people just gave up and went away because the queues were so long, or there was kerfuffles happening with people that didn't have the proper tickets trying to get in. So I noticed that you said that you've done a substantial review of the management plan and the ticketing areas, the entrances and exits, the control room. Can you just explain a little bit more about what the problems were and how you've dealt with them for you?
We can definitely talk about the problems.
Yeah.
The ways that we've addressed them this year, we can talk about in a closed session because they are. This is still a movable feast, and security is incredibly important. But we can talk about the problems for
Absolutely.
sure.
we can give you some headlines, which I think hopefully
Well,
will.
I think we're going into a
We are,
part two,
yes.
so I will perhaps pick it up then. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I don't know, Chair, do you want me to ask some of that now or just leave it all to...
I think it's what you're comfortable with more than...
Yeah.
So I think we can talk about what the issues that... Yeah, exactly that. So last year we experienced an uplift in the number of people coming to the event with fake tickets. And what the challenge was is that understandably, people had spent a lot of money on these fake tickets and couldn't quite understand that they had, been tricked. And so when we informed them that this was a fake ticket, they were not willing to move away from the entrances, which then created a crowding barrier, basically, which then meant that some people who had official tickets and were trying to get in weren't able to get through. So that was one of our challenges. The other big challenge that the event has is that we have a high volume of non-ticketed people coming into central London in the off chance that they might get into the event or be able to see the fireworks from a not a viewing area. And again, those people do tend to head towards entrances, and so that again causes problems with people with official tickets being able to access the event.
One of the things that struck me was that, and this is in a report, I think, that you gave to us, that says that following COVID and the introduction of live audiences, there seems to be an increased expectation that people can just turn up and gain access, but also that audience behaviour has changed and that they're becoming less compliant to restrictions. Is that something you're seeing across all our events, or is it just this one?
It absolutely is, yes. And it's not just live events. It's being experienced in things like theatres, where people are unwilling to adhere to, the rules of being in a theatre. So it's audience behaviour has changed, and they are less likely to follow instruction and less likely to follow authority. And that's something that we are experiencing at a lot of our events.
Okay, and I think that then leads into perhaps some of the training you give that your stewards. Mm-hmm. And I noticed that you had 3,000 private stewards last year, which was quite an uplift on the year
Indeed.
Before. What are you looking at for this coming year? And are you training them and how to, I suppose, more difficult situations are arising that they have to deal with as well?
So we are increasing the number. That number is still to be determined because we are still in the planning process. And we absolutely identify that it is vital that those stewards have the information they need to be able to do their job correctly. So we are ensuring that they are given the information in a handbook, but also through briefings, so that they are really clear on what their role is within the event plan and what they are there to do. We have also reduced the breakdown between an SIA steward and just a steward. It was 25 to 1, and now it's 15 to 1. So we.
What does SIA stand for?
Yeah, sorry. So SIA means that I'm going to give you the official term. Bear with me. Let me just find that information.
Essentially. Yes, exactly.
Fully trained and licensed, I'm assuming.
So an SIA is able to screen members of the public at a gate. They're able to do bag and body searches. They can eject people, and they can respond to incidents with crowds, whereas a non-licensed steward just is there to provide customer care duties, can provide safety advice, event information, can assist with evacuations, and can monitor and maintain crowd flow. So there are differences in what they can do.
Thank you. And then my final question in this section then is around the facilities that you offer. For example, the adequate number of toilets and so forth. Are you making any changes to any of those facilities, or does it work on a sort of per head basis?
So it works on a guide, the Purple Guide, which is a guide specifically for events. So there is a ratio between number of people and number of toilets that you need to provide, and we absolutely meet that requirement. Toilets have been an issue in the past, but I'm glad to say that we are definitely in a position where the toilet provision is satisfactory and people are happy.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair, and I'll come back to my questions later on.
Thank you. Assembly Member Georgie.
Thank you, Chair. This is purely anecdotal, but anecdotal in the sense that people that I've spoken to that have gone to successive fireworks events and the time that I went, a lot of the time, this event, and I'm not ascribing blame necessarily, but it turns on to a borderline of a death trap, quite frankly, you know, both during and after, due to the number of people, the way that the event sometimes is handled, and once again, you can't ascribe blame because it can be one rogue operator, let's say. So, given this, and your own numbers, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say it's the vast majority of people, as you've already outlined, are satisfied with the event, and I'm sure that's very well true from those that have responded. But in terms of looking forward, is there a different way we can say that without it making it sound like it's all hunky-dory, it's all fine, everyone's happy, you know, and recognise that there are significant issues because of the nature of the event? You know, how do we go about, you know, so it doesn't sound so dismissive, oh, everyone that went said they were really happy, as opposed to we recognise there are serious threats to people?
I'm not sure we would recognise that there are serious threats or any kind of characterisation of a death trap. I don't think that would be operationally correct of us to substantiate. We can definitely think about the way that we refer to satisfaction levels of the event and of those who attend the event, yes.
And I think it's fair to say that as working in events, we always strive to improve delivery of events. And so even if it's 100 people that were not satisfied with the event, we would listen to their feedback and consider it in the planning for future events. So, you know, we are absolutely open to receiving feedback and responding to that.
As David's kind of outlined, we start planning for New Year's Eve on January 2nd. You know, there is not a...
Yeah.
That's you being ejected from the meeting, Nicole. You're free to go. No.
It's just that the planning of the event is something that takes place throughout the year. So, as Nicole has alluded to, it isn't something that we wait until, you know, the summer to start planning. We are planning, it's an all year round planning process. And so the feedback that we receive normally within January and February is absolutely taken into consideration.
Right. With the greatest respect, I tried to put my question as generously as I possibly could, but now I'll probably be less so, because the answer that I had from Nicole was effectively, well, Assembly Member Georgie, you're completely wrong. You know, it's all fine, it's all wonderful, and 83% of people said it was fantastic. That was not the point I was making whatsoever. The point that I was making is, due to the nature of the event, there are serious, you know, I don't want to say health risks because that implies something else, but, you know, serious risks to individuals in terms of physical presence. So I would suggest that we begin by recognising that fact, which I think, David, in part of your answer you did, but then equally it's more about how we handle that in the future and just making it safer. And I appreciate that safety is obviously at the top of your agenda, but just looking at alternative ways of doing that, because as I say, I think looking at things over the years, and I don't think any mayor has particularly cracked this, so this isn't a political point, just how we make these events safer. I think that's the crucial point.
There we go. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks. Assembly Member Mafaz.
Sorry, yeah, just to clarify, because I think it's really important in today's day and age about disinformation. So how many years has this been running, this event?
There's a question. So in its current format, as ticketed, it's been running since 2014.
And just to clarify, and this is obviously a very touchy subject, but as it's been brought up, how many people have died as a consequence of attending the event?
None.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, just, if I may, just say to Assemblymember Mafuz, there's a first time for everything, isn't there? And you shouldn't have to wait for someone to die before you change things.
Okay. Let's try and put hands up and yeah, that would be good. But I think the point's been made is there's been an issue raised around safety and a clarification, I think, from Assembly Member Mahfouz around the situation that he perceives. Perception is in everyone's gift. Assembly Member Baker.
Thank you. Just returning to some questions grounded in reality. So you've talked about a whole range of challenges that the event obviously throws up. So just want to invite you to either expand on things you've already said or anything new in terms of challenges you're facing for this year and how you're doing that given past experience. Does that make sense?
Sure. I can expand a little on what we have discussed, but again, some of this will need to be discussed in the closed section.
Fine. Yeah.
But an area of work that we are focusing on in particular for this year is the Zone X areas, which are areas outside of the event footprint and which can be described as the areas between the entrance to the event and the transport hub. So we are exploring identifying what those areas and then ensuring that there are plans in place with our key stakeholders so that if an incident should arise, there is a plan to deal with that incident. So that is a key focus for us this year and is a new element to the event planning.
And is that primarily as people are leaving, or is that just the whole time, just being aware that you just need to be more aware of those areas where people are going to be moving and congregating? And
it is the whole time.
Yeah.
So anybody who's a ticket holder has clear instructions to arrive by 10:30, before 10:30, when the gates will shut. There is an influx of people after 10:30 who are clearly not ticket holders. That creates quite a pressure around the event footprint in the Zone X area that David talks about.
Is that people who are trying to get in, but also people who are just thinking, I'll rock up there, I might be able to see some stuff?
Yes.
They're hedging their bets.
Yeah. No, understood. Thank you. Can I ask specifically, there was an increase in refunded tickets. There was quite a substantial increase in refunded tickets last year. Can I ask what the criteria was that was used for refunds last year?
So there was an increase in refunds last year, but to be clear, it actually only equates to 3% of all ticket holders. Yeah. So we actually took it on a case-by-case basis, so to ensure that we were listening to everyone's concerns, and we took it on an honesty-based policy, and ensured that anybody who had a genuine request for a refund was granted a refund.
Yeah, and those were sorry, Nicole, I'll further up and follow up and give you a chance to come in. But those were primarily related to the problems with fake tickets turning up and
correct.
Then not people who had tickets not being able to get in and stuff like that because of the drama that caused.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That. Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, Nicole.
That's all.
That's
what I was going to confirm. Yes.
And so, I mean, is there anything more that you'd like to talk about the measures you can take in terms of fake tickets? Obviously, it is a problem not limited to this event by any means, but there are a variety of ways of dealing with it. I wonder if you could talk about that.
Absolutely.
As well, just be if there's anything you feel you need to take into private session.
I was going to say we can talk a bit more freely about that in the private session if we want to.
Yeah. Would you like me to hold that off?
Again, we can give broad headlines.
I think it is important if we can have a public answer, but
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think that's probably helpful because, of course, actually, when people are trying to buy tickets, I mean, I'm sure they're literally all of them watching this right now. But, just getting that information out there about actually what you're going to do to make sure that people
absolutely.
are buying legit tickets.
So for this year, we are changing our ticket. So what that looks like will be different. And I can go into more detail about what that is specifically in the closed section. But we are using a more robust ticketing system. We have revised and updated our process at entrance gates so that we can remove people who do turn up, who don't have a ticket or do have a fake ticket. We're also putting in a further check within the entrance process to make sure that only people with official tickets can access the event. We work really closely with the police, and we will do so on the night, along with the local authority enforcement officers, so that anyone who is selling tickets, ticket touts, or people claiming to sell tickets can be removed. And also, a big issue for us is fake websites claiming to be the official ticket provider. So we have reported those to Action Fraud, and that is currently being investigated.
Sorry, I'm just checking. Assemblyman McCartney isn't trying to buy a fake ticket right now.
I was just checking, and you're not the first one that comes up.
No.
Yeah.
We are aware of that.
So is the primary problem, of course, this changes, it's a bit whack-a-mole, isn't it? Is the primary problem like fake tickets, or is there a substantial sort of on-the-ground ticket touting operation on the night as well?
It's mostly fake tickets from fake websites, but there is some on-the-ground ticketing. Last year, the police did arrest someone who was selling a number of tickets, but mostly it's people thinking the website they're on is official and buying tickets that actually aren't real.
No. Understood. And going back to security, can I ask you what new security measures you're implementing as a result of the impending introduction of Martin's Law?
Yeah.
It's primarily based around the Zone X area that David was describing. If you want to...
Yeah, again, it's sensitive information in the public domain, but in general, it's just looking at the areas around the event footprint, making sure that we have plans in place and that all stakeholders and partners are aware of those plans. So it's making sure that we've got very consistent, thorough, multi-agency working. We're looking at an expanded security and stewarding plan. We've spoken about the Zone X areas. We're also looking at our medical plans to make sure that they are fit for purpose outside of the event footprint, so not just in the event. We're looking at infrastructure and making sure that it is robust and can do the job that is needed, and also just looking at C3, which is command and control, and comes back to decision making should an incident arise.
Essentially, under Martin's Law, the New Year's event is classed as an enhanced tier event. So that is the parameter under which we're working. That means, so an enhanced tier event is described as a premises or events where it is reasonable to expect that 800 or more individuals may be present on the premises or attend the event at the same time.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much.
Can somebody help Assemblyman McCartney?
If you want to send any of the links to us, we are reporting them constantly.
Absolutely.
So,
Please do.
Thanks very much. Those are all my questions. Cheers.
Thank you. I was just looking myself, and that is really worrying, though, that the website and actually some of them looking quite sophisticated, especially a number of people, obviously, we know will be buying internationally. I know you are reporting this, but I think perhaps as a committee we need to look if there's anything we can do to help, because that is really worrying. Assembly Member Russell.
Thank you. I want to take us back to the actual fireworks. We were talking to Phil Grucci from New York earlier, and I'm wondering what measures the event management company Identify, the GLA and other partners have implemented to minimise the environmental impact of the event, and are there any particular ways that sustainability has been considered?
So fireworks aside, the event production company have a full sustainability policy and plan in place for the delivery of New Year's Eve. So that ensures that we are reducing the carbon emissions where possible. We are sourcing local suppliers rather than suppliers, say, from Scotland, for example. And
supplies of what kind of things?
So that could be anything from toilets to barrier to now you're testing me, to any kind of infrastructure that might be needed to deliver the event. So there is a full sustainability plan in place for that to ensure that where possible the emissions are being reduced. the GLA also has an event sustainability policy, so our production company has to adhere to that as well. So there is a full sustainable plan in place to ensure that where possible things are being reduced or in some cases eliminated. In regards to the fireworks, I will confess that I'm not an expert in the environmental impact from the fireworks. However, our production company work very closely with an organisation who have created an environmental modelling calculator to determine the impact of the fireworks on the environment, and they have provided some information on that. And actually, similar to what Phil was saying, the biggest creator of carbon emissions is actually the audience and the vehicles that are transporting equipment to the event. The fireworks themselves make up a very small proportion of the carbon emissions for the event.
So, is carbon offsetting part of the?
It is,
process
yes.
Here?
So there is a tree planting program in place, but the actual carbon emissions from the fireworks display are actually quite low. So so that it doesn't equate to a huge amount of trees being planted.
Okay, is it possible to write to us with some detail on that so that we can get it? Thank you very much. There's some research suggesting that there are different kinds of fireworks, greener so-called fireworks, that may be less polluting. Now, obviously, the sort of transportation, we heard earlier about the sort of transportation of explosive stuff and, you know, all of that. That's all very expensive, but also there's carbon emissions in those journeys, whether it's by boat from Spain and Portugal that the explosives come, or whether it's overland. Have you sort of factored in the possibility of using different alternatives? And if not, are there any particular factors that influence that decision?
We haven't factored that in, but that is something that we could take away and discuss with our production company and the Pyros company to look and explore to see if there are alternatives to the resourcing of those fireworks.
Thank you. That would be useful to hear back from you on that once you've done that. And then we heard about drones, and we heard about drones with fireworks earlier, which was something that was new to me, and actually rather a terrifying thought. But kind of just imagining, you know how fireworks in a back garden used to go wrong, and just imagining that happening on a drone. But will drones be playing a part in this year's New Year's Eve event?
We can't confirm the final creative content, but I can say that the use of drones in the UK is slightly different than possibly our friend in America, where the weather is very temperamental on New Year's Eve. The winds, the rain, and all of that really impacts the ability to use drones.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, I think that does me for my questions. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Amazing, thank you. And before we enter into closed session, I made a massive boo-boo, and I forgot you, Assembly Member Prince. So we might need to... I lied. I said I was trying not to lie. Anyway, are you sure? Because I'm interested now. Okay. Okay. Yeah, okay. Well, maybe we'll find out in closed session. The next set of questions involve the discussion of items under London New Year's Eve fireworks event, which are considered commercially sensitive, can I ask the committee to agree, pursuant to Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, that the press and public be excluded from the meeting for the discussion of the remaining question on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined at paragraph 3 of that schedule, and it is considered that in all the circumstances of the case, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Thank you. The broadcast will now be stopped and the public meeting concluded as we move into an exempt session. Please could any members of the public or press, you'll hear the hordes leaving the gallery, now leave the public gallery and the broadcast stop.
Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall.